Hey, Dog Nation, I'm Brandon Adams here on the field at Vanderbilt after Georgia gets a 62-0 win against the Commodores today. Welcome into our Dog Nation postgame show presented by the UGA bookstore. We'll get your thoughts here coming up on exactly what you saw from the Dogs and the Doors here today. Maybe a measure of revenge from Georgia after getting the cancellations at the end of the 2020 season. Certainly Georgia got everything it wanted from Vanderbilt here today, building a 35-0 lead very early in the first quarter, then coasting for much of the second quarter before pouring it on some more there in the third and fourth quarters. We saw three different quarterbacks play for Georgia today: JT Daniels, Carson Beck, obviously Stetson Bennett in between both those. We saw Georgia seemingly leave the game with a chance to get some guys rested. You didn't see Kendall Milton play, as for instance. JT Daniels only threw the ball 10 times today. He came out of the game pretty early. Injured players that you kind of had wondered if they'd come back and play today, they weren't called upon. They didn't travel with the team. Guys like Dominic Blaylock or Darnell Washington or Tyke Smith. So Georgia was able to come out, take care of its business, do what it needed to do in SEC play without having to put any of its guys who have been injured in harm's way or guys who may be a little bit banged up, not have to call them into service here today. So in a lot of ways, what you saw from Georgia is almost exactly what you would have wanted and what, in a lot of folks' mind, going to be that final tune-up game before Georgia begins a much more difficult, much more challenging stretch coming up in the month of October, starting next Saturday in Athens when the Arkansas Razorbacks come calling. Obviously, Auburn, Kentucky after that, and, of course, the end of next month with the Florida Gators, the biggest game that Georgia will play in the regular season. All of that fresh on our minds right now, and what Georgia did today may be a precursor for more of what Georgia has planned as the rest of the season unfolds. I'm going to go through in a couple other things here as far as what I saw from the game today and then give you a chance to weigh in with your thoughts there as well. I think that we're really in the midst of seeing one of the most impressive emergences of a Georgia player that maybe we've seen the Kirby Smart era. And I said this on Twitter during the game, and I'll repeat it here right now, that when you think about Brock Bowers, what he's doing as a freshman tight end, it may be tempting at first to want to compare him to other tight ends that have come through the program and talk about Georgia's previous usage of the tight end position. But really, I think the more appropriate comparison for Bowers right now is not any previous Georgia tight end or any other player on the Georgia roster who might play tight end. Right now, the best comp for Brock Bowers, I know this sounds extreme, but I mean it matter-of-factly, the best comp right now for Brock Bowers when it comes to Georgia and the Smart era offensively is probably George Pickens. The way that Pickens had really the high watermark for a pass catcher in the Smart era back in 2019 when he had the 8 touchdowns, when he had the more than 700 yards receiving. Right now, Brock Bowers is easily on pace to match or eclipse that. I think that you're looking at the potential emergence here of probably the most potent pass catcher that Kirby Smart has had since he's been Georgia coach. So when I think about the headlines that probably matter to me most, and we'll do more on Bowers later on the show, but when I think about the headlines from this game that probably matter more to me than any other, that really is probably at the forefront of my mind right now, is the fact that through 4 games here, Georgia has proven itself that it has an uncommonly good freshman, an uncommonly good, not just tight end, but let's think of Brock Bowers as a pass-catching target. He also had a rushing touchdown here today. That gives him 5 touchdowns here on the season. Brock Bowers is a real offensive weapon for Georgia. This is not a drill. This is happening before our very eyes. Georgia has gone out and gotten itself a very impressive true freshman who right now is the focal point of the Georgia passing attack, at least on the receiving end of all of that right now. It was nice to see Kearis Jackson back playing the receiver spot here. We mentioned a moment ago that there were some injured players for Georgia who were not called upon today, and maybe a couple of guys that better safe than sorry were held out of the game, Kendall Milton included, but you did see Kearis Jackson back getting a chance to play there at the receiver position, and that was a good thing to see. Keely Ringo also got to start at the cornerback spot for you here today. That obviously going back to last week when you had a couple of breakdowns in the passing game that led to some big plays by Josh Vann with the Gamecocks offense. Georgia may be making a little bit of a switch there today. Hard to judge how well he or any of the Georgia defensive backs did. Of course, you saw Kamari Laster get the interception late in the game here today, but ultimately this wasn't a day that Georgia was tested really in any fashion whatsoever, even the defensive back. So how does the new group look with maybe Ringo starting over Amir Speed and Darian Kendrick manning the other side? It's just going to take an opponent of a higher caliber than Vanderbilt to bring any of that discussion to the forefront. You saw a good bit of Broderick Jones today. Jones got a chance to play some left tackle. There was some rotating around where at one point in time you saw when Jones was at left tackle, you saw some of Justin Schaefer at left guard with at one point in time Jamari Salyer not in the game. Then you had moments in which Salyer was at left guard with Schaefer out there. Georgia was doing a lot of rotation, but at the end of the game, you had kind of some wholesale changes all the way around. But Georgia is trying to get Broderick Jones to be more game ready. It seems like that's working out pretty well. He got a chance to play a good bit today, and using the lopsided score as an opportunity to experiment with some of those other spots there along the offensive line seemed like that was something that Georgia wanted to do. I mentioned Kendall Milton's situation a moment ago. Milton, as word was given on the SEC network, apparently I wasn't watching the game on television. Maybe y'all can tell me more about what was said. But Milton, who did travel with Georgia, we had him as a part of our Kroger kickoff before the game. Good shot of him giving hugs and well wishes from his family, and he showed some affection back, as so many of these players do with their families during that dog walk. So we saw Milton before the game coming into the stadium, but did not see him during the game. And typically speaking, when a guy in a situation like this travels but doesn't play, that's generally speaking hey, let's hold him out and keep him safe type of situation. Let's don't use him unless we really, really have to. And Georgia found out today that it did not have to. And apparently the SEC network broadcast of this today talked more about Milton's lack of availability for Georgia, or the desire by Georgia not to play him, maybe if it did not have to there today. We'll talk more about, some of the stuff that comes up here from the game, and obviously your opinions are what matter on a show like this, so we'll give you a chance to be a part of that. Here is part of our Dog Nation postgame show presented by the UGA Bookstore. Of course, looking forward to seeing you back in Athens next Saturday as part of the UGA Bookstore as well. We'll be there for the postgame show after that, and of course, big things going on before the game there, too. It's another noon start, second consecutive noon start for the Dogs, at least from an Eastern time zone standpoint. But before that kickoff against the Razorbacks, big day there at the UGA Bookstore from 9:30 until 11:30 a.m. A chance to see former UGA defensive back Tyson Campbell, now in the NFL, the great Lindsey Scott, the architect of one of the most memorable moments in Georgia history, the touchdown pass that helped Georgia beat Florida in 1980, preserving an undefeated season on the way to a national championship. Lindsey Scott's going to be on hand, and legendary former UGA coach and athletic director Vince Dooley, who signs books and greets dog fans so frequently there at the UGA Bookstore. He's going to be on hand next Saturday there as well. So make your plans to be there yourself from 9:30 until 11:30. That's before the kickoff at noon against Arkansas. And, of course, we'll be back at the UGA Bookstore after the game next week there as well. I'm looking forward to seeing all of you there for that. So what do you say we start on Facebook first here? We'll go to YouTube after that. We'll get some of your comments and give you a chance to weigh in on what was a thorough beatdown for Georgia, 62-0, a final against Vanderbilt today. So your thoughts going to roll through here on this as a part of our Dog Nation post-game show here this evening. And, of course, as I'm waiting for my comments to fire up here, let me remind you that good coverage ongoing at DogNation.com. Connor Riley, Jeff Sintel, they've got you covered on all of that. You may have seen Jeff Sintel on Twitter a little earlier today, our Dog Nation recruiting insider. Also taking a visit this weekend to see Luther Burden, the 5-star wide receiver and a big-time target potentially for Georgia's 2022 class. So you can follow that with Jeff Sintel when it comes to recruiting. You can also laugh at me as my hair blows all over the place here as well. But either way, we got a lot of good comments and a lot of fun coming up here as we discuss all of what's going on here. Frank DiCarlo says, was I surprised by anything that I saw today? Frank, I don't know that I was necessarily surprised, but I was, I guess, pleasantly impressed, if you will, that Georgia was able to go out and make it look as easy as they did. I mean, listen, in the SEC, I would say that an easy win is sometimes not as easy to come by as sometimes it might look. And you may say, well, Georgia's absolutely, coasts against Vanderbilt today, and you may, speak on that as about the quality of the opponent, which I understand why you would maybe think that. But for Georgia to go out today and make this one look as easy as it did, I think you got to give the Dogs a lot of credit for that. So was I surprised? I probably didn't expect to be 62-0, to be completely frank with you. So if anything, I was pleasantly surprised that Georgia coasted today to the extent that it did. Alan McGovern says, imagine now a healthy Darnell Washington, who is, we hope, set to return on one side of this Georgia offensive formation with Brock Bowers, another tight end there on the other. That could pose a real problem for these opposing defenses because of Kirby's talked about this before, that one of the values of throwing to a tight end is the mismatch opportunities that creates, right? You're not guarding a tight end with your best defensive back usually, right? That's usually a guy that's lining up on that kind of boundary side wide receiver. You call him the X receiver a lot of times. That's usually where your best defensive back is lining up, and then you start kind of going down the trough a little bit. Those are the guys that are oftentimes called upon to guard tight ends. That's why the NFL exploits the tight end so well. That's why smart offenses across college football are doing that. And for Georgia, given the emergence of Brock Bowers, and some of this I do believe is just a willingness or a know-how on Todd Monken's part to get the ball to guys like this, But on the other hand, Bowers probably brings a skill set to that position that's maybe a little bit unlike what George has had. Not to say that previous guys haven't been athletes. I mean, Charlie Warner's on an active NFL roster, has been with the San Francisco 49ers. Isaac Notto was a former five-star. They've had athletic tight ends, but something about the way that Bowers puts that skill set together is a little different seemingly than what they've had. And using him and Washington together in the games as they become even more important for Georgia throughout the month of October. No, I think you're absolutely right about that, Alan. I think that's a lot of fun to consider. Hugh Nash says, not being salty after a great win, but not sure I understand not taking this opportunity to give both our young quarterbacks some actual reps in our regular offense, just handing it off. So I understand where you're coming from on that. I mean, and I saw some of this on Twitter myself, and I knew this would come up as far as the conversation goes of, well, Stetson Bennett got to be the second quarterback that played today, and therefore he's the guy that got a chance to do some throwing by the time you got to third quarterback Carson Beck. I mean, I think that Beck still had a decent number of attempts. I'll have to look at the overall stat line on that to kind of see what he had there, but it's not like they didn't let Beck throw it at all. And as far as Brock Vandagriff not playing, there just aren't very many games where Georgia's going to play four quarterbacks. Really, any team in college football is going to play four quarterbacks. And in anticipating the fact that the Beck conversation would come up, because I knew it came up pretty heavily last week there as well, here's what I presume that Kirby Smart might say if he were here with us right now. And honestly, I would like for Kirby Smart to be asked a question like this. I'd love to give him a chance to speak on this issue. But if Smart were going to be as candid as he possibly can be, here's what I think he would say. That in a development of a young quarterback, practice is more important than the games. And that right now, guys are playing to the degree in which they have earned that at practice. And I'm not trying to give you coach speak. I'm not a coach. I don't have to give you coach speak. But in this particular case, this is what I think that Smart would say. That, a lot of fans, and as I said before, I've seen this on Twitter. I'm seeing this in our comment sections right now. They'll say, how are these guys going to get better if they're not playing in games, getting a chance to throw in games? And what Smart would say in response to that is, you get better during practice. You earn your chance to play during practice. That's where you improve. And you come out here in the game and you show what you have been working on in practice. And so Smart's going to reward playing time on the basis, I'm assuming here, of how guys have practice. And I know that sounds like coach speak, and in this particular case, maybe it actually really is true. Even if you're not quite, buying it, maybe that really is what's true here. That Smart is evaluating guys like Carson Beck and Brock Vandagriff, and he's evaluating on their ability to improve, and he's rewarding them with playing time right now on the basis of that. The fact that Vandagriff, as a right now for Georgia number 4 quarterback, is not playing very much, I really don't take that to mean much of anything. This is a guy who just arrived on campus. I think there's a chance that next year Brock Vandagriff could be Georgia's starting quarterback. I don't think the fact that he's kind of buried on the depth chart right now means that won't be happening. Georgia, there are a lot of teams in the SEC, keep this in mind. There are a lot of teams in the SEC that don't travel 4 quarterbacks to a game like this. Georgia has pretty frequently taken 4 quarterbacks for the very reasons that Vandagriff was here today, because a future starter getting used to what it feels like on the road, getting used to the environment that's created there, at least a potential future starter, getting a chance to be a part of huddles and just learn and absorb whatever information you can by standing on that sideline. For SEC road games, you can only take 70 players. So most programs are forced to be very judicious about who they put on that bus or plane, whatever the mode of transportation is, who you put on the plane to come to a place like Nashville. You got to choose guys that you think have a chance to play. But in Georgia's case, they do use one of those extra roster spots on that 4th quarterback because they want him to absorb what he can. So today was an important day for Vandagriff, first time to be in, if you want to call this a road SEC environment. There were more Georgia fans here than Vanderbilt fans. But nonetheless, just getting used to the rhythm of travel, getting used to the routine that goes along with something like this. I think it's a fair question, and as I said before, I anticipated it coming up. But I think that we have to appreciate the fact, and by we, I mean those of us who follow this team, fans, media, everything else alike. I think we have to appreciate the fact that, for the most part, the work of improving as a Georgia quarterback takes place Monday through Friday at practice, and the game is just a reflection of what's been going on during practice. I believe that's what Smart would say if he was here today. Peter Jeffrey Wilson also mentioning Ladd McConkey. He says, is he that fast or is Vanderbilt that slow? I mean, if you listen to Terrence Edwards, who joins us obviously each week on Dog Nation Daily, Terrence, for quite some time, has really been wanting folks to know just exactly what Georgia had when it comes to Ladd McConkey. This is a guy that Terrence is a big believer in. And 2 touchdowns today big plays, creating those, I think McConkey really validated himself. If not for Brock Bowers' 3 touchdowns, you're probably leading the show by talking about what Ladd McConkey did. Of course, in a game where 62 points were scored, some of the McConkey scores seem like 100 years ago by the time the game was finally done, but you get the point that I'm making. It was quite a performance for McConkey, and I am of the belief that as Georgia moves through the month of October here, you're going to see Ladd McConkey be a guy that gets the ball thrown to him in his direction in some of those bigger games. This is a guy who right now, even with everybody healthy, I think has the look of someone who's kind of in Georgia's wide receiver rotation. Is this true? Is James Leonard Brown saying this? Did Missouri really lose to Boston College? That is not a good performance. And I don't know how much of y'all follow this. You'd be forgiven if you didn't pay any attention to it at all. But Eli Drinkwitz, the Missouri coach, who I actually kind of like. I think that Drinkwitz is kind of candid and honest, and I think that coaches should be that way, and I appreciate the fact that Drinkwitz is. And he gave some very candid remarks here this week about the fact that he wishes his team wasn't playing Boston College, wished they were playing a regional rival, wished they were playing a team that had some juice for recruits. He said, I can't remember the last time we got a player from the great state of Massachusetts. I mean, Drinkwitz, very uncommon for an SEC coach to essentially shrug off a game before it was played and say, if I had my way, apparently the game was scheduled obviously before he became Missouri coach 2 years ago, but he said, if I had my way, we wouldn't be playing this game. And then you go up to Chestnut Hill and lose the game. Of course, Boston College had used this for motivation. Their coaching staff was pretty clearly, pointing to this as a rallying cry for their team that, the Missouri coach is saying he doesn't even want to play the game. So not a good look there for Missouri if that is indeed the case that they've gone down. Greg Baker says, y'all check me out. I'm behind BA. Are you really back there? Well, hello, Greg. I appreciate that. A few folks here still left in the stadium, so folks checking in. Appreciate that. Gerald Harmon says Bowers is that dude, and yeah, I think right now that dude is a pretty good description all the way around there. Let's also check in with some YouTube comments there too. And for those of you watching DogNation.com, the DogNation app, for some reason I have not quite figured out how yet to get the comments for the DogNation.com there on my phone. There you go. There's Greg Baker right over there. Good to see that. That's awesome to see. I have not quite gotten these comments from DogNation.com on my phone as of yet, so I apologize. So we love our DogNation and DogNation app viewers, and I've got to get better about getting these accessed on my phone there. Jay Shipe says Missouri's been a little bit of a letdown this year. They've not played the level of football that I thought they might be capable of playing. Foster Moss says Notre Dame is about to walk away with a W there in Soldier Field. Probably the big non-SEC national game today was the Wisconsin-Notre Dame game, and Notre Dame was the underdog there, but going to come out a winner there in that spot. Jermaine King, yeah, in this case, I think the other day on the Kroger kickoff, I think somebody said they were behind me. I think they were just kidding. But in that case, Greg really was there. Let's see what else. Jermaine Jones says, that's why you need Carson Beck to show the ability to run the full offense. And as I said before, I get why people want to see that. But in this particular case, Smart's going to say what he's going to say, which is they're learning that full offense during practice. G. Grace Bama Boy says, who is an Alabama fan, says Bama fans never mention the third and fourth string quarterback. That's a UGA thing. G. Grace, I got to admit, it does sort of seem like a little bit of a Georgia thing, where we spend half this postgame show talking about, third and fourth quarterbacks. But listen, if that's what people want to talk about, I'll let them talk about what they want to. Jim McLaughlin says, what's going on with Kendall Milton? So, Jim, the word on Milton, and I'm being told this from the SEC Network broadcast, somebody that watched on TV may be able to tell me more about this, but they were holding Milton out today, I guess, as a precaution. I didn't really hear the specific reason that Milton wasn't playing, but it was known on the TV broadcast, kind of behind the scenes. What happens is the coaching staffs and sometimes key players will meet with the TV broadcasters in the couple of days that lead up to the start of a game, and oftentimes what is said in those meetings is very different than what's said in the press conferences, where coaches are very careful not to reveal anything. The truth is, because they know the broadcasters, and the broadcasters for the most part are sworn to secrecy prior to the game kicking off, and so therefore a lot of times coaches will say more to broadcasters, I'm talking about the TV broadcasters for the game, in the intimate setting of those pre-game meetings. They'll say other places. It sounds like for Matt Stinchcomb and who was working with him today, whoever was working with Matt today, that it was revealed prior to the game to them that Kendall Milton would not be playing. So my understanding is, and I said before, for those of you who are watching on TV, you may be able to share more insight on this, but my understanding is that Stinchcomb, the rest of the broadcast team, were able to say during the day today that they already knew that Milton wasn't slated to play. He did travel, he was here, was dressed, but apparently it was a planned absence for Milton during the game. And as far as, what this was related to from an injury standpoint or whatever else, I guess we'll have to rely on Kirby Smart, hopefully giving us more information on that after the game is done. Boy, I'll say this there as well before we get more comments. You see this grandstands behind me where, for a long time tonight, certainly seemed like this afternoon, certainly seemed like these stands were very slow filling up. You had, very empty stadium. I joked at one point in time, it seemed like the crowd we had for Warner Robins last night in high school football was probably bigger than what you had here. But really, by the time the game kicked off, I'm guessing a lot of hungover Georgia fans who had their fill of Broadway last night finally finished off their Bloody Marys or their screwdrivers, whatever it was they were drinking, and they made their way over inside the stadium. By the time the game kicked, you had a beautiful sea of red all the way across here. A really, really impressive showing by Georgia fans. Probably not quite as many as were here back in 2019 when really the entire stadium was kind of taken over there at that point, but a good number of Georgia fans all the way around, and a pretty impressive showing as the Dogs get ready to make their way back now to Athens, and certainly they'll have pleasant memories of the Georgia fans who were here today. We'll get a few more. Scott Boland says, will I be on Lower Broadway tonight? I don't know, Scott. I got to go back home. So, listen, no one's going to shed any tears for me. But last night, I was in Warner Robins for the Warner Robins Lee County game, calling that for our friends at Peachtree TV, CBS 46. And so that game ends, it's 11:30 or whatever. And so I get in the car and I drive to Chattanooga. This is where I'm not always the smartest person in the world. I thought Chattanooga was a little closer than it was. I didn't get to Chattanooga in my hotel last night till about 2:45, almost 3. Probably head didn't hit the pillow until about 3:15. So I woke up 6:15 and made my way from Chattanooga to Nashville there at that point in time. When I'm checking out of the hotel, the lady at the front desk was like, how was your stay? And I was like, honestly, it was really, really short. Like I could have gone to one of those, pay by the hour hotels and maybe done a little bit better all the way around there because I was only in the place for 3 hours. But nonetheless, got a little sleep and feeling okay right now. And so I don't know if I've got any Broadway in my future or not. I believe I might fall face first on the floor at Tootsie's for a different reason than some of the people there are oftentimes, face first. Let me give you a quote here from Kirby Smart. A couple things coming in here. Pretty good stuff here. Kirby Smart challenging fans to get there early for a noon kickoff. Obviously, we saw Georgia fans here today kind of filing their way in. Smart wants that crowd there for that noon kickoff. He says if our fans are going to be elite, we'll have a chance to put on a heck of a show at Sanford Stadium next week. So a big challenge to UGA fans to come out there and do that. Question to reporter. He says you talk a lot about playing to your standard. Was there anything in that first quarter that was substandard? He says the kickoffs. And then, so here's the update on Kendall Milton for those of you who want to know this. So Kendall Milton's nursing a shoulder injury going back to the South Carolina game. He said Milton could have played, but he didn't need to. And that's sometimes what happens in these road game situations. Georgia's willing to use a couple roster spots there at the end of the list for fourth quarterback, running back not likely to play. They're kind of content to do that there just a bit. Let me also remind you once again about, speaking of next Saturday for the noon start against Arkansas, a lot of folks piling in there. Also, your chance to be at the UGA bookstore before the game, 9:30 to 11:30 a.m. Tyson Campbell, the great former Georgia defensive back, now in the NFL. Lindsey Scott, the terrific hero of the 1980 National Championship season. Of course, the legendary former coach and athletic director Vince Dooley, all on hand next Saturday from 9:30 and 11:30 a.m. Also, make sure you do your shopping. Not too early to start thinking about some great holiday gifts. And, of course, as we're kind of rolling into the meat of the season, making sure you're well-stocked yourself with all the Georgia gear that you need from all the famous brands. Peter Millar, Southern Tide, Nike, 47 brand, Vineyard Vines, Tommy Bahama. What am I leaving out? So many great famous makers putting together some really good-looking UGA gear, and you can find it for yourself at the UGA bookstore. And, of course, big autograph signings next week there as well from 9:30 until 11:30 a.m. All right, more comments. Let's roll through here. Jonathan Moore says everybody was late because 24 was shut down for Iraq. So, Jonathan, I hate to hear that. I did hear that for some folks traffic was really bad. And it kind of brings back, memories from week 1 there as well, where I know a lot of folks had a hard time getting into Charlotte because of some pregame traffic there too. For the most part, I avoided that, so I'm glad to know because I was coming over from Chattanooga today, so I avoided bad traffic, thankfully. But for the folks who had to deal with that, I know that's stressful. Traffic finally kind of got bad once you kind of got into Nashville a little bit. Other than that, that was okay. Georgia and Olive says, remember, if I am hanging around for Nashville and the scene there later on tonight, she says, remember, Tootsie's is discouraging dancing on the bar, even if your team won really big. Yeah, I don't know. For 62-0, maybe I will get on the bar and dance for a minute there, or at least maybe one of these days. Maybe not tonight so much, but maybe one of these days I get a chance to be back there and do that again. Jonathan Moore said he said he boogied right on through on I-40 coming across the state there, so I'm glad to know that. Marcinio Askew, good to see you checking in. Matt Rukavina says Notre Dame just keeps on winning. Yeah, pretty impressive spot there in the neutral site game against Wisconsin. This is a Notre Dame team that I had some real questions about based on closer than it should have been against Toledo. Really, in retrospect, much closer than it should have been against Florida State. But a little bit of a statement being made there today by Notre Dame as my hair is just flying all over the place. Steve Schiavini says, and the Irish covered 2 weeks in a row. Yeah, so maybe they're starting to figure some things out here just a little bit. A few more of your comments coming in on YouTube. Christy having some fun here. Glad to know that. Texas Dog, who I saw last week there at our UGA bookstore for our post-game show there. Good to see him checking in there too. And hopefully I'll be not flying all over the place. Jermaine King says I'll be dancing on the bar if they're playing some Garth Brooks, taking it back to week one, the Friends in Low Places. Yeah, who knows? Maybe we'll turn the post-game show into a little bit of a karaoke bar on some of these days when Georgia wins really big. That doesn't sound like a bad idea. Maybe we'll do that there at some point in time. Ben Shepard says Wisconsin has no offense. Yeah, apparently today offense was pretty hard to get going there for a while. Tennille Calvino kind of weighing in on the same topic there for a moment. Let's see what else. So I guess folks already kind of weighing in on the Texas A&M Arkansas situation there too. Jim McLaughlin says the first quarter today was unreal, and it really was. I mean, Georgia gets out to the 35-point lead as quickly as they did. Really pretty impressive stuff all the way around. By the way, for some of our folks over the DogNation.com homepage, Bill McConnell, Thomas, Grammy D, a lot of folks checking in with some go dogs and some good wishes, and I certainly appreciate that. Thanks to all of you for being over there. Let's see what else is happening over here on the Facebook side of things there for a moment. Keith Venny says, will the game next week be game day? I guess we're still waiting to hear about a lot of that and kind of, but there's, certainly a chance, of course, still early between Arkansas and Texas A&M right now. But if the Razorbacks were to get a win, what I've been told is that there is a chance that game day would select Athens as its location for next week. The game is actually on ESPN. It's not the family of networks. It's on ESPN. So you'd have one of the rare opportunities for ESPN to do a show live from the venue where they're then going to roll right into kickoff of that game. When ESPN has a chance to do that, in the rare moments when it does, there's usually a little extra juice for that. So I think ESPN liked the idea of the two ranked teams playing on their network, the big network, not the SEC network. And so if Arkansas were to get a win today against Texas A&M, there would be a chance that even though it kind of got the worst time slot for the upcoming week, it could get a big, TV spot in terms of College game day potentially being on hand. That's at least a possibility, or so I have been told. So a few more comments here, and we'll probably bounce out of here in a little bit after that. Hope folks are enjoying themselves and having a good time all the way around here. Ace Dog, thank you for the kind words. Appreciate that. Johnny Lester says, please no motorcycles tonight. Yeah, that's probably a pretty good idea all the way around. Texas Dog says he's still learning how to tweet. I think a lot of us are still trying to figure out a lot of this different technology text. So whatever is all good with me. He said one of these days I'm going to figure out how to direct message some of you dog fans so we can all get together next time I come to Athens. Yeah, Texas Dog was hanging out with us last Saturday. It was great to get a chance to see him. And all of you that come on by and see us, we certainly appreciate that. So to recap some of the things we started the show with here today, to me, in a game in which 62 points were scored, there's a lot of things that you can highlight, but I don't know that anything was really more prominent than the performance of Brock Bowers today. 3 touchdowns, a rushing touchdown, 2 through the air, gives him 5 on the season. This is becoming a very dynamic weapon for for Georgia right now. A real weapon all the way around. Very, very impressive stuff. And how Georgia looks to build on that with him throughout the rest of the season, I think is going to be key here. I get the impression that he's going to be a big part of what Georgia does offensively for much of the rest of the year. And you can kind of put them right there alongside anybody who's been catching passes during the Kirby Smart era. That's how good of a start Bowers has gotten off to with his career there tonight. Or this afternoon. I keep saying tonight. The sun's shining as bright as it can possibly be. It's not night. It's a day game. But we are certainly reacting to all that right now. Kendall Milton held out because of what Kirby Smart has now confirmed as a little bit of a shoulder situation. That was an issue. I thought it was very interesting and nice for Georgia that JT Daniels comes in, got some work in, really looked very crisp and sharp when he was playing, and only had to throw the ball 10 times today, 10 attempts, and his day was done. And people talked a little bit about Stetson Bennett a little earlier. It's important to note that what happened today was not a replica of what happened last week, where Bennett was inserted into a spot that the game was still close, and then in most cases you're not taking your starting quarterback out of that spot. Today was a little bit different version of that. Today was a day in which JT Daniels' day ended early. So Bennett coming in today was not what happened last week when he was inserted in kind of what at the time appeared to be a rotational situation, although the rotation didn't continue for the rest of the game. But today it was not a rotational insertion for Stetson Bennett. He came in because Daniels, who is still working his way, I guess, back to full health from the oblique issue that kept him out of the UAB game, Daniels, after throwing the ball 10 times, getting a big lead built around him, was able to come out of the game. So important to note there was a little bit different kind of thing there today. Jason Glossier talking about the 56-30 win for Warner Robins last night over Lee County, a game that I was lucky enough to call. Our buddy Jeff Sintel in for Rusty Manziel last night. And, given the opponent, Lee County, one of the deepest and best teams in the state, I really thought what Ware County did, last night was as impressive as anything we've seen. Probably right there alongside what Collins Hill did to Rome a couple of weeks ago. And Collins Hill's obviously maybe the best team in the entire state right now because of what Travis Hunter's capable of doing. And, really so much of that about the sensational highlights of Hunter. But I don't know that Ware County and its dismantling of Lee County Ware County, where's that coming from? Warner Robins. I don't know that Warner Robins and its dismantling of Lee County last night is taking much of a backseat to what Collins Hill did in our game a couple of weeks ago. That's how impressed I was with the number one team in 5A last night. James Leonard Brown talking about the situation there. There's a lot of good football being played in that kind of Warner Robins area. When you think about Warner Robins and Northside, which share that stadium, they call it the MAC, and you have the Demons on the one end zone, Eagles on the other, and so Northside and Warner kind of share that one. And obviously Houston County, folks know that from where Jake Fromm went to high school, and Trey Hill was there too. So yeah, a lot of very good football being played there in that part of our state. Matt Rukavina calls him Brock Bowers because he's a beast. I would agree with that there as well. Also, for you pro wrestling fans, I kind of think about Paul Heyman doing the Brock. For some reason, I kind of think about that a little bit, the Brock Lesnar type stuff for Brock Bowers there too. I could see a little bit more of that. All right, a few more comments. We're going to get ready to roll here today. In fact, while these comments roll in, speaking of Bowers, let's go ahead and make him the winner of our Marco's Pizza moment of the game. 3 touchdowns, 2 through the air, a rushing touchdown there too. Really set the pace for Georgia today in what turned out to be a very easy win. His 2 touchdowns to begin the game, the first 2 scores of the game, really a signal this was going to be all dogs all day long today. So why not Bowers there? Those 3 moments, collectively speaking, will be our Marco's Pizza moment of the game. Of course, you can find more about Marco's Pizza when you go to Marcos.com, the Marco's app, and take advantage of the golden brown crust, which is always baked just perfectly. 3 cheeses melted on top, also ooey gooey and delicious when you're watching football here this weekend. Old world toppings, the sausage, the pepperoni, all that kind of stuff. It's all there and great savings there too. You can currently get a large 1-topping pizza for just $9.99. That's $9.99 for a large 1-topping pizza, so make sure you check that out today. And congratulations to Brock Bowers, probably the first of many, but he's our Marco's Pizza moment of the game winner there today. All right, a few more comments from you, and then we'll let you get on with the rest of your weekend, and I'll get ready to make my way back to the great state of Georgia, victory in hand here today. Tennille Calvino checks in to say she loves Amarius Mims. A lot of folks I think are going to be loving him for quite some time to come. Foster Moss says Bowers is kind of like a George Kittle, so I can't quite call him a Travis Kelce just yet. So obviously you got to leave him some room to work his way up towards that, and I understand all of that. Jim McLaughlin says Bowers needs a year's worth of free pizza. Yeah, I'm sure he could probably do some damage there. Belladonna Vintage and Taro says, good to meet you last week in the UGA bookstore with Texas Dog. Yeah, it was good to meet you there as well, too. That was a really fun thing to be able to do. That was great. Jim McLaughlin giving us an update here on the Arkansas-Texas A&M game, saying a drop pass kills that Arkansas drive. So thanks for the update on that. Jermaine King, thanks for the kind words. I will try to be healthy and safe coming on back here. We'll see if I can make it all the way back home or if I have to stop and get some more rest here on a Saturday night all the way back. Easy Brown impressed with what he's seeing from the Arkansas running game. And, of course, we'll see that group up close and personal next Saturday there in Athens. And I'm really looking forward to what's coming up next for Georgia. The Georgia-Arkansas game is going to be really fun and a little bit different vibe than the game maybe typically would have had. At one point in time we were thinking, oh, well, this is Sam Pittman coming back and he's going to wave at the crowd and he's going to do the video tribute thing. Well, with Arkansas ranked and playing some really good football, all of a sudden you can't quite give Pittman the favorite son status when he comes back to Athens. You've got to treat him like a true foe and a true opponent. Although Georgia fans still like him, they can't cheer for him next week in that spot. And so I think that Georgia-Arkansas game takes on a slightly different vibe than maybe at one point in time we assumed it might take. Then you think about Auburn on the road. I'm still not quite sure what to make of Auburn. They won easily a couple of times against nobodies, including maybe the worst team in the country in Akron to start the season. And last week they played it relatively close against Penn State. I thought that Kirk Herbstreit was interesting this week when he gave some praise to the Tigers. I mean, the one thing that I at least have my eye on that Auburn game for is anytime you're talking about, being on the road in Jordan-Hare Stadium. Yes, Georgia won the last time it was there, and it has won plenty in Jordan-Hare Stadium in recent years, but that memory of 2017 kind of still sticks in your head there just a little bit. You think about that some. I think going on the road to Auburn's at least a game you have to take a little bit seriously. I can promise you Kirby Smart's going to take it very seriously. And then it's a Kentucky team that we're also still trying to figure out right now. If we're going to say a team like Arkansas has been slightly better than you might would have expected, or maybe even much better than you would have expected, I think it's fair to say with the game against South Carolina pending today, Kentucky's probably been a little bit of a disappointment, especially last week in the game against, Chattanooga and, the slugfest against Missouri that at one point in time just looked like two pretty good SEC East teams battling each other. But now Missouri goes out and loses to Boston College. I think that this is a Kentucky team that I think some thought might be kind of a fringe top 25 type team. And, their season could go a couple of different ways by the time they get to Georgia here coming up in a couple of weeks. And obviously the Florida game just looms as big as ever. We knew that would be true, and that's clearly going to be the case here. So that's what's in store for Georgia throughout the month of October. Some very interesting games on the horizon. But for now, two things on my mind. Georgia came to Nashville. It was looking for that revenge against Vanderbilt. At least we presume it was. It's not going to admit, the Georgia coaches and players won't admit that, but you kind of get the feeling they still remembered having those cancellations and the frustration of that a year ago, and they took out all that frustration in a big way on Vanderbilt today to the tune of 62-0. Very, very impressive. Now you turn your attention to what is next. I read you the quote from Kirby Smart a moment ago, challenging Georgia fans to make noon feel like a big atmosphere in Sanford Stadium next week. No excuse for, at least in Smart's mind, for getting there late or making it a sleepy atmosphere or being concerned that the Georgia players might not show up with their game faces on. I think Kirby would say if the fans are ready to go, if the students are there early, if the stadium is as loud as it can be, all of a sudden that would be a wake-up call to any Georgia player that may have slept through his alarm clock there that day. So that's the challenge from Smart, getting ready for Arkansas. And we'll obviously talk a lot about that in the time to come here on Dog Nation Daily here this week. So we'll get ready to say goodbye to you here from Nashville. Thank you for your comments on both Facebook and YouTube. And we read a few from the Dog Nation homepage and the Dog Nation app there as well. We really appreciate all of you being a part of what we do here when we travel to come to these games and bring you great coverage. Make sure you read everything that Connor Riley and Mike Griffith have as post-game reaction. Georgia coaches and players talking about what happened against the Commodores. They'll have coverage of that for you at dognation.com. Jeff Sintel, as he tweeted out today, getting a little bit of a up-close and personal look at five-star wide receiver Luther Burden. Good stuff coming on the website on that coming up in the days to come there too. So all of that's on the way. But for now, big thanks for all of you being a part of our Dog Nation postgame show, and a huge thanks to the UGA Bookstore for making it all possible. We'll see you next Saturday afternoon at the UGA Bookstore for the postgame show, and before the game from 9:30 until 11:30 a.m. as Tyson Campbell, the great former Georgia defensive back, Lindsey Scott, a Georgia legend, Vince Dooley, one of the most hallowed names the program has in its history, a guy whose name is literally attached to the field at Sanford Stadium because of the great legacy he put together. All three of those gentlemen signing autographs before the game next week at the UGA Bookstore. See that, then roll right into Sanford Stadium. Get ready to root on the Dogs against the Hogs as Georgia looks to take down Arkansas. Thanks for being here for our Dog Nation postgame show presented by the UGA Bookstore. Hope all of you have a great afternoon. Get a chance to watch a good bit of football now, so hope you enjoy that. I'll see you Monday on Dog Nation Daily and next week for the Dog Nation postgame show presented by the UGA Bookstore.